Well, thank you very much, Mark, and welcome to Miami, everybody, especially those of you who came from somewhere other than Florida. We appreciate you being here, and as we would all tell you, you visiting Florida, you're the reason that we don't have a personal income tax, and so come back on a regular basis. Absolutely, Jim, so thanks for that. And again, Mark, thanks for welcoming everybody. So we started out with the pledge this morning, and I want to make a pledge to all of you as well. So if you remember, we all know the words quite well. Two words are united and indivisible. And those both seem like interesting words to think about our country right now, right? Not very united, and I'm not so sure you can say that we're indivisible, so to speak. I say that to say this. We're going to invest the next day and a half talking about insurance and talking about what's best for competition and ultimately what's best for consumers. And here's the situation, folks. About 12 years ago, when we started this annual conference, and it's now become, as all of you know, I think the largest, but arguably one of the most important events happening in the Southeast relative to making insurance more competitive and creating an environment that is best for consumers. I say that to say it was about 10 or 12 years ago that I stood before you and I was apologizing to the insurance industry. Some of you were in the room when we did that. Not just for Charlie Crist, but for the conditions that Charlie Crist was creating relative to competition. In the name of consumerism, Florida was actually doing what was in the worst situation or scenario for consumers. And so all these years later, I want to thank all of you for staying in the fight. We've had a lot of victories over the years. We've had some setbacks in the Supreme Court, and I think what you're going to hear over the next couple of days is the conditions are now favorable in Florida for consumers to win. And consumers win, once again, when we all stay united behind competition, when we have actuarially sound rates. And I don't care if we're talking about workers' comp or property insurance or any other kind of insurance. It's what we all want. And I think the conditions are right again for legislative success. And almost more importantly, I think conditions are about to be right again where we have a Supreme Court that actually upholds the law and actually continues to, or stops the undoing of what you've all done. So the Florida Chamber has 6 summits a year. On everything from talent to autonomous vehicles, transportation, and infrastructure. But this is our annual summit where we're talking about the future of insurance. And we happen to be in a state that I would argue is not only the most important state on the road to the White House, but is also the most important state from an insurance markets perspective, because we have a lot of interference in our markets right now, especially when you look at what billboard trial lawyers are doing and what they have done. And it'll be no surprise. It is not possible for me to speak to all of you and not talk about the negative impact that billboard trial lawyers are having on consumers and on this industry in Florida. And again, I think conditions are right for some changes to take place there. So with that being said, let me thank all of our sponsors for the 2018 Florida Chamber Insurance Summit. This is not just a day and a half conference. As all of you know who are sponsors, who are part of our planning committee, when we get back to the office later this week, we actually start planning next year's conference. And you know this if you're a sponsor, we count on you not only for your financial backing of this year-long effort, we also count on you for ideas. Who are the best speakers? What are the right topics? What are the conditions going to be in 2019 that we need to be talking about? And so, again, over the last 12 years that we've been doing this, I just can't thank all of you enough for being there. I think insurance in Florida is one of those things. You can't just pay attention to it once in a while. You can't just pay attention to it when we have storms, because we have, whether it's regulations or whether it's litigation or whether it's legislation, there's something always going on. And again, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know about Florida. So, with that said, just to do what Mark Delegaw said earlier, I want to set up a little bit of where Florida is right now. Again, I know that everybody who lives in Florida, we just went through a $1 billion election season, where we saw hundreds of millions of dollars pour into Florida from outside Florida, right? People are trying to influence what happens in our state. And so, but for those of you who aren't from Florida, I just want to give you a little bit of a mission briefing, if you will. If you've ever been on a trade mission with us, you know the first thing you do when you get to Brazil or Israel or wherever it might be is we talk about, you know, what's going on in that country. And so I want to give you a little bit of that right now about Florida. And at any time you want to know how's Florida doing, you can always go. There's a website that a lot of us use called thefloridascorecard.org. And not only does it have Florida's metrics on it, all 67 counties are also there as well. Everything from unemployment rates to job openings to housing starts, you name it. All the metrics are there, and it's really beginning to get people to focus on what's going on in Florida, what's going on in their region. And so here's a bit of an overview of Florida. So I'll start and end with this. If Florida was a stock, I'd be buying as much of it as I could. I think our fundamentals are very, very strong, and the kinds of problems we have in Florida are generally the kinds of problems that most states wish that they had, right? So I'm not up here to tell you everything's perfect. I'm up here to tell you the momentum is in the right direction. And if we can make some adjustments, think of lawsuit abuse reform as an example, if we can make some adjustments, then we can go even faster. We can diversify even further. So big picture, Florida, this year, Florida became a $1 trillion economy, right? That's a big deal. On a global stage, that would make us the 17th largest economy in the world. We're bigger than Saudi Arabia, just to put that in perspective. We're adding almost 1,100 people every day, 7 days a week, if you think about that. We're adding almost $1 million of, think of W-2 income, think of wages. We're adding almost $1 million an hour to Florida, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, right? So 1,100 people a day, think about that moving into Florida. 5 million more people are going to be here by 2030. We need to create almost 1.7 million new jobs. And when we talk about auto insurance, keep in mind we're going to have 3 million more drivers on our roads by 2030. We're going to have 150 million annual visitors to Florida, right? We're at about 116 million right now. So we have to be thinking about the growth of Florida if we're going to think about the policy choices that we make today. And speaking of policy choices, I just want to tell you, I mentioned that the conditions for consumers to win, I think, are better than they've been in a long time. When you take the Supreme Court that we should have here in another couple of months, and you put our new governor, Ron DeSantis, who's not been bashful at all about talking about the need for lawsuit abuse reform, and then when you combine what Speaker Oliva has been talking about and what President Galvano has been talking about. President Galvano and I were on a PCI panel a month ago or so, maybe 2 months ago. It was just before the election, and everybody was very bullish about if the elections went the right way, there was really no reason not to expect reform. And Speaker Oliva, I think everybody in here probably saw just recently, talked about, you know, in this era where everybody wants to talk about how do we get people to take home more pay, right? You might remember what he said. He said, well, we ought to start by lowering costs. And there's almost no better way to directly lower cost than to get the lawsuit abuse costs out of this industry. It's well documented, and in fact, in just a minute, I'm going to show you, we're unveiling for the first time some brand new data, a brand new tool that will help us, help you, and help local chambers throughout Florida begin to show what the impacts are in terms of cost of insurance. So here is what that looks like. And you're seeing this for the first time in the country, first time anywhere. We've partnered with Milliman and also Rating Dynamics, and you're going to be able to download this later, but let me tell you what you're looking at. We're the only state chamber in America that has a full-time chief economist, and some of you know Dr. Jerry Parrish, and what he's been doing with our two partners, and by the way, this is live at the FloridaScorecard.org, And if you go to your county, so Mayor Baker, if you want to go to Pinellas County, you could click on Pinellas and you could actually see your county. But let me tell you what you're looking at here. What our economist has done is looked at incomes in all 67 counties and then looked at homeowners insurance in all 67 counties. And I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but every county has a number inside of it. So Sumter County has the number 1. That means that Sumter County has, relatively speaking, the most affordable homeowners insurance in Florida. When you come down to Dade County, you will see a number 67. And you'll see that that is the least affordable homeowners insurance on a relative basis. The entire point of this exercise, right, is not to compare rates from one company to another. The entire point of this exercise is to change the dialogue in Florida and to start having consumers start getting interested in what in the world are these billboard trial lawyers doing driving up my rates, right? So we have to change the narrative and we have to actually get out there and we have to show what these impacts are. It should be no surprise to anybody in this room that when William Large, who's our partner at the Justice Reform Institute, talks to you later, I'm sure he will repeat this statistic as well, but Florida is rated as the worst judicial hellhole in the United States, and specifically Dade County, Florida, is routinely rated as the worst county in the United States. It is no accident that Dade County is worst on this map and worst according to every tort reform measure that you want to look at. The question is, will our legislature put consumers before trial lawyers? That's the real question on the table, and I feel better about that today than I did in the last several years. A couple of other data points here before I move us on. Again, all of these come from the floridascorecard.org, and so if you want to look at, there's new data available from our partners at the Institute for Legal Reform that have just come out with a report. The average family of 4 in Florida now pays over $4,200 a year in what they call lawsuit abuse tax, right? So we're one of the highest in the country. So if, and I agree with Speaker Oliva that we need to do all we can to lower the cost of living in Florida, one of the things we can absolutely do is lower that lawsuit abuse tax. And there's almost no other industry that has as big of an impact on that as the industry that's in the room right now. We also monitor citizens. You're going to hear from Barry later today. This is just a phenomenal, great news story. Remember when we had 1.5 million policies at Citizens? You can go to the floridascorecard.org anytime you want, 24 hours a day, and you can see how many policies Citizens has. You can also see what the exposure is. Obviously, this ties directly to the health of the market and competition, so that's why that's there. Look at automobile insurance as well. We have the second highest auto insurance rates in the nation. And again, we're not showing these because we're proud of these numbers. We're showing these because the average voter, the average consumer, increasingly wants to know what can be done about it. And the good news is this conference every year, and you're going to hear from legislators, you're going to hear from CFO Petronas, you're going to hear a lot about assignment of benefits. You're going to hear about everything from blockchain to lawsuit abuse. We're going to talk about reinsurance. We're going to talk about citizens. We're going to talk about as many of the major drivers of insurance as we can fit in this day and a half. Assignment of benefits. I wish we didn't have to talk about this anymore, but the data is very, very clear. Since 2000, lawsuits are up 90,000%. And every time I say that, there's somebody in the room that comes up to me and says, you misspoke. You said 90,000%. I didn't, that's not a misquote. That's absolutely right. 90,000% increase in lawsuits since 2000. We absolutely, and you know, Barry, I hope you'll cover this when you talk later. I go to a lot of citizens' hearings just to hear Barry talk about the absolute facts of what's happening with assignment of benefits and how it's driving up costs. I say that to say this: we're very proud to be part of a coalition. You can go to fightfraud.today. There's a big coalition, a consumer protection coalition that's been created, and the Chamber's honored to be a big part of this. I actually want to show you a public service announcement that we were helpful in putting together, but when CFO Jimmy Patronis arrives later, I hope you'll shake his hand and I hope you will thank him for putting his own name forward to help warn consumers about these shady contractors and these billboard trial lawyers and to not sign away their rights. And so if your company is not part of the Consumer Protection Coalition, there's a huge group of associations, agents, huge group of us across Florida that are growing this. This is the largest consumer protection coalition in the nation, the largest protection coalition of its kind. And if you're not part of this, it's real easy to join the efforts of a lot of different groups in Florida. So,
if you suffered damage from Hurricane Michael, beware of repair damage scams. Some contractors may ask you to sign a document called an assignment of benefits. You might be signing over control of your insurance claim. Before you sign anything, call your agent, your agency, or call us. 1-877-MY-FLCFO. Don't let this hurricane damage you twice.
So again, when Jimmy gets here, please shake his hand and thank him for doing that. He has now been elected to a full term as our Chief Financial Officer, and as those of you who don't live in Florida may not know, that means he also serves on the Florida Cabinet, which is an incredibly important body that we work with on a regular basis. But I got to tell you, and you know this, but it bears repeating, to have somebody like Jimmy Patronis, who when he was in the legislature regularly earned a 100% with the business community on our Florida Chamber report card, to have somebody who's willing to go on and talk the facts about what's going on in this industry is going to help you, it's going to help us, but more importantly, it's going to help consumers win in the end. So with that said, I'm going to ask Mark Delegal to come back up. And I do want to tell you, we have an initiative that some of you have helped support over the years called Florida Wins. And Florida Wins is an employer-to-employee education initiative. And we actually have videos on assignment of benefits, bad faith. If you want to find an easy way to share a 90-second informational video with your employees or with your agents or with family and friends so that they can understand some of these complex issues, Florida Wins is an award-winning site. Some of you have helped us make that available. We don't have time today to show all those videos, but Florida Wins, just look that up and then look for all the educational videos that we have on assignment of benefits and on insurance reform. Again, as president of your Chamber of Commerce, I can't thank you enough for all that you do with us all year long. I'm very bullish on the next two legislative sessions. I think the conditions for consumers winning are very favorable. I think the conditions for competition are very favorable. And I'll end with where I began. If we can stay united and not let others in the business community or the trial lawyer community divide all of us, I think that at next year's conference, I think we're going to be talking about how much progress we're in the middle of making. So thanks to all of our partners that are here. Thank all of you for being here. I'm going to turn it back over to Mark. Thank you.